Hello, my name is Ann Mason. I am the Executive Director of the Plymouth Antiquarian Society, and this is the first video in a 5-part series on gravestone epitaphs and iconography filmed on Burial Hill in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Gravestones provide valuable biographical information on individuals. They can also help us understand cultural beliefs as well as attitudes toward death. Today we'll be studying the gravestones on Burial Hill to trace the transition in different motifs that are used to communicate ideas about death. Burial Hill is a wonderful place to study gravestones because in a very small area we see them from the 1680s all the way to the 1950s. I'm standing in the section of the graveyard where we have some of the oldest stones here, and we can start our tour at the gravestone of Joseph Bartlett. Joseph Bartlett died April 9th, 1703 in his 38th year. We can see at the top of his headstone 3 symbols: an hourglass, a winged skull, and crossed bones. If we move to the right, the gravestone next to Joseph's is his mother's, Hannah Bartlett, who died in 1710. And here we have a very similar winged skull with an hourglass above it. Now, these symbols were not supposed to be creepy or scary. They are reminders of mortality. We often use the Latin phrase Memento Mori, which translates, "Remember that you must die." They are a symbolic reminder of the inevitability of death. The flesh will decay, and only the bones will remain. The hourglass suggests that time is brief. Sometimes hourglasses have wings, suggesting the concept time flies. Some graves on Burial Hill even show a full skeleton. So the gravestone of Thomas Faunce shows a skeleton sitting on an hourglass. If we walk to Joseph Bartlett's footstone, we can see a verse that communicates this idea. Once again, at the top of this footstone, we see that winged skull, which is often called a death's head. And I know it's hard to read here since the lichen is growing over the words, but the verse is, "Thousands of years after blessed Abel's fall, 'twas said of him being dead, he speaketh yet. From silent grave, methinks I hear a call, pray, fellow mortal, don't your death forget. You that your eyes cast on this grave, know you a dying time must have." Now there's a biblical reference in this verse. Abel was the son of Adam and Eve, who was killed by his brother Cain, as recorded in the 4th chapter of the book of Genesis. God says to Cain, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." So the epitaph here on this footstone suggests that just as Abel's blood cried out, so does this gravestone remind viewers that death is coming. It helps the Joseph Bartlett, in a sense, cry out to those who remain that they too will die and that they should be prepared for their death. We're going to cross the path to another section where there are Bartlett family graves. And these show different styles of the death's head. Gravestone carvers had their preferred techniques, and there's a huge variety that you can see on Burial Hill as well as in other cemeteries throughout this part of New England. If we get in closer here, this is the gravestone of Hannah Bartlett, who died in 1732. You can see that her death's head looks very different from the death's head on Joseph Bartlett's stones. It's much less of a recognizable skull, has this triangular shaped nose, and a heart-shaped mouth. And instead of distinctive wings, we have these lines radiating out from the skull. This death's head was carved by Nathaniel Fuller. If we go back a row, we come to the grave of Abigail Bartlet, who died in 1765. Her death's head was carved by Noah Cushman. Archaeologist James Dietz referred to this style of death's head as a Medusa head, and I think you can see why. Again, it looks less like a skull with wings and more like a face with snakes perhaps coming out of it if it were a real Medusa, but definitely very curly hair. And now let's walk back across the path to John Bartlett's grave. John Bartlett died in 1775, and on his gravestone we have this very realistic carving by William Coy of a skull and crossbones. Now this, you might notice that this gravestone, like the other gravestones that we just saw, is encased in granite. And in case you're wondering, that's a way to preserve the stone. It was an old conservation method used here on Burial Hill. But I want to look closely at the shoulders of the gravestone. So here on the right and also on the left, you can see that there are these winged cherub faces that appear. So John Bartlett has a skull and crossbones, and he has winged cherubs. And we're going to talk in our next video about this new motif that we're seeing.